I am incredibly honored to have Jason Mercer and John Michelle on DiMichele, sorry, on my podcast today. Both huge, incredible names. Their reputation precedes them. Most people who are listening will already know who they are. But again, John DiMichele is the CEO of TRREB, and John Mercer is the Chief Market sorry, I'm going to say that wrong, but the CMA. The CMA. And they are here to join me to talk about the market and what's going on. And I think we'll touch a little bit on who and what TRREB is, because I think people hear that name all the time. They hear the acronym, but I don't think everybody really knows who we are, right? I count myself as a member. So I will let you guys do your own little introduction. Maybe John, if you want to let everybody know who you are and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I'm John DiMichele. I'm the CEO here. I've been here since 2002 as a staff person, and I became CEO almost, I guess we're in my 11th year of that. So, but before that, I was a realtor. I was a realtor since the mid-90s. I also ran brokerages for Royal LePage Real Estate Services Limited, two of them. Was on the board of directors of TRREB. I was chair of MLS Technology Council, which I served on the council for over 10 years, and the responsibility was Realtor.ca. And then I served on the TRREB board of directors, and then joined the board as CIO. So I guess you could say I'm responsible for the technology since then. I've obviously since handed it over to people like Jason. But basically in Canada, we are the largest board in Canada. That makes us the largest board in North America by 70,000 members, or approximately that. And we always compete with some of our American organizations because they want to be the largest board, because if you're the largest board in North America, you're going to be the largest board in the world. But we're committed to the preservation and the advancement of professionalism. And we support our members, as everyone knows, here through our various programs. We also have a great and expanding professional development lineup, so members can build their skills, learn the new systems, et cetera, et cetera. But we want members to be ahead of the curve. We work hard to make sure that they understand changing compliance issues. They can take various courses and learn how to really stay out of trouble, if you will. And otherwise, we also have a professional standards and arbitration department that works on a regular basis. But another stream that we spend a lot of time in is the advocacy side. We work with all levels of government, and we advocate for better policies. We want them to have an innovative approach when it comes to housing, and of course right now we have that situation of affordability. And really this is a big file. As you know, or I don't know if you've actually been to some of our market year in review sessions, but we're pretty hard-nosed about what we do. When we speak our minds, and we want to make sure that there's a more sustainable real estate industry. And I always have to remind everyone that during COVID, simply because we worked hard to have the government acknowledge us as an essential service, without the real estate industry, what would have happened to the economy?
So true. It's so true. I've always been very impressed with the amount of advocacy that the real estate board in Toronto does. It's a shame, I think, that there's always going to be haters and trolls, and there's this idea that we're all out there to make sure that we're making all the money, and that's why we had to be an essential service. And I think that what people forget is how incredibly important housing is for the average person. I've actually taken a bit of a stream in some of the topics lately just on all the policies at all the different levels of government that are affecting affordability. And so that there is, a light being shined on, how we got to this point, right? And it's not, as much as some people want to kind of blame the realtors about just pushing the prices up and, we're making so much money, and like that whole kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that, there's 3 levels of government that are all complicit in putting together policy that has contributed to us being, and I'm not blaming any politician or this is not a political conversation, but, I think that the average person does not know the advocacy that is done by the organization. So thank you for bringing that up, John.
Well, it is one of our main pillars, and we'll talk more about that. But the issue we see is that they need to get out of the way. Government needs just to get out of the way, and they can't stop pointing fingers. As you know, we don't make the decisions, or realtors don't make the decisions when they're with consumers. Consumers decide if they're going to buy or sell. Bottom line. Right.
Yeah, they give us a lot of power, don't they? Like, I can't make anybody do anything, I assure you. As good as I am at my job. And then, as I was saying to Jason before we started, I'm a real data geek. I came from the digital marketing world, and I really love how we're moving in the direction, I have to say finally a little bit, but like I'm glad we're getting there, of really using data to determine decisions. I come again, like I worked for likes of Microsoft, and data is king in 2025, and that won't stop. And so being able to put those tools in the hands of realtors to be better, not about making our jobs easier, but giving more to our clients, more information, more, not personal opinion again. That old saying, like, ask 5 lawyers, you get 5 different opinions. Let's entrench our decisions in data. As I was saying, I've heard really good things about Habitat. I'm really excited to dig my heels into it. But Jason, your job fascinates me. I read your recap. So Jason writes the recap, right, of the Market Watch every month. And I go through the numbers with my team every month. I love digging into the nuggets of it. So please take it away. Tell us all about what you do for TRREB.
Sure. I wear a couple different hats at TRREB. I'm the Chief Information Officer and also the Chief Market Analyst, but really the 2 roles are very intertwined, because obviously when we're talking about managing and rolling out new technology products to realtors, a lot of that revolves around obviously MLS technology and related plugins, things like Altus and public records and assessment and what have you. But it all kind of moves together to give realtors all the information they need to add value for either their buyer or seller clients. And so obviously, as you mentioned, on a monthly or quarterly basis, we're gathering up a lot of this information and reporting it through things like the Market Watch, or our quarterly releases like the rental and condo market reports. And as you mentioned, we've launched a new platform over the last few months called Habitat that allows people to go in and even drill into that data further and create their own reports. And that's only going to improve in the months ahead. But I think it's important to note as well is that the handover from a market perspective from 2024 into 2025 it has certainly been a little bit tumultuous. Like we saw a small improvement certainly last year, especially in the second half of 2024, where sales are up and we were seeing some support for home prices, and obviously the feeling is that with interest rates set to trend even lower in the first half of this year, that we see an even further uptick in transactions. But obviously we've seen a little bit of uncertainty get injected into the marketplace, as a result of the election south of the border and the prospect of tariffs, both real and anticipated. And I think, at least in the short term, that's given some buyers pause. And so it's really sort of a wait and see attitude right now as we move through the end of the winter and into the spring, to see how that's going to impact people's decision to purchase a home or list their home for sale.
I find it's a great point. I just did a little bit of my own like market review for my database, and I was saying it's like the tale of two T's. First of all, it was temperatures, and then two was also tariffs, because I mean, I've been doing this long enough that I've seen winters completely like shut down a market, and we just experienced like the coldest, craziest, snowiest winter we've seen in years. So it's interesting going full circle to talk about like, you know, data is so important. But then I also tell like so many people, like our job is also about people's lives and emotions and how they feel in their daily lives. So we can put together all this data, and then people are like, you know what? It's cold outside. I don't want to go out.
Well, it's a really important point too. I mean, John had mentioned our year in review and outlook report and event, and you know, this was the 10th anniversary of both.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and so basically, you know, all the listeners can go to the TRREB website, TRREB.ca, and you can look at past reports and some of the special research we've done on different aspects of the market, affordability, missing middle, traffic, and what have you. But you know, one of the things that we've done year in and year out is engage Ipsos to do consumer polling, both, you know, looking at recent home buyers as well as people that are planning on purchasing over the next year, and of course those that also say they're not planning on buying. And we ask a lot of questions as to the whys and whatnots. But you know, something we ask every year is, are you planning on using a realtor? And this gets back to your point about, you know, value add, right? Because you know, on the one hand, you know, there's a lot of information out there today, a lot of data, a lot of different sources where people can get information on what's going on in the housing market. But at the end of the day, we consistently see that 80% plus of people who are planning on buying a home right off the bat are saying, you know, they're going to need the services of a realtor to help them navigate through that process. Obviously, they're taking advantage of that realtor's on the ground knowledge. They also want to take advantage of that realtor's professional networks, whether we're talking about, you know, lenders or home inspectors or financial planners or what have you. And that's really what, you know, the realtors bringing to the table is that on the ground knowledge of a given neighborhood or a given home type, but also bringing to bear, you know, these professional networks to the transaction, and you know, it makes it much easier for a potential buyer or seller.
Well, I mean, I don't know how many people who would say they go to seek legal advice for the law. Most people know the law, you know, but they need a lawyer to represent them, to negotiate, to solve a problem, and that's what we're here for. But it's a very good point. So we'll do a little, maybe like a round table. So I think everybody gets a sense of, you know, what you guys both think. So we've kind of heard, you know, what you both do, where we, you know, see TRREB as, in your roles in it. Let's talk about, you touched on 2024 and this prediction of like, and I said it too, you know, listen, interest rates are going to go down. I did not see a frenzy like we saw in COVID predicted, but you know, we expected people were going to come back to the market. We knew from talking to mortgage brokers, from talking to our clients, that I went into 2025 having more buyers sitting with me waiting for something to buy than I ever had in my career. John, what would you say if you had to recap 2024 in, you know, kind of a blurb or an elevator pitch? What would you say, you know, you saw in 2024 as an overall feeling or trend?
Well, I think people are being cautious, and they don't want to get caught again like they were during COVID, where all of a sudden we saw housing pricing spike. And then, you know, even though there are a lot of buyers out there, and I truly believe that, I think there's a lot of people waiting, but I think they're being cautious. I think they're being smart. But there's a bunch of other factors that people are considering now. So a lot of things impact not just the psychology of a buyer or a seller, but things like monetary and development policy. So if these things are too strict or confusing, or there's any risk at all, then people start to think through, what am I going to do? But there's the intangibles like congestion that people consider. Should I be living in the city, or am I driving into the city? Everybody believes it's a significant problem, and the Toronto Region Board of Trade did some new research, which we also had in our market year in review, that says that it affects productivity, mobility, people's quality of life, everywhere. So we need to do things like create these transit-oriented developments and better infrastructure so people can still keep moving. And I mean, Jason's heard my speech on this too many times, but it's true. Like, I can't understand how a car that's stalled takes 5 or 6 hours to get off the highway, and they create this bizarre bottleneck. And I know that because I drive in from Oakville every day to Don Mills, which is crazy, but I've been doing it now for like many, many years. And we've been advocating for transit-oriented development for years and years. So if you're going to have these, the opportunity to create the missing middle or higher densities, and like 65% of Toronto is covered by single-family homes. And I think what we need to do is get a little bit better at creating a zoning regime that allows people to do this, and then we need to have like fourplexes and without too many limits on height, something that matches. And we've seen evidence of how people do that extremely well. So what we need is better government. And right now, some of the challenging things, I mean, from my perspective, is that we did another poll in the fall for, to provide that evidence. And we're evidence-based decision makers, right? We need to have the evidence in order to make our choices. And we show the data. Think about it this way. 72% of the residents. No. So when we ask the general question of everyone, over half of the population says they're thinking about relocating out of GTA in the next couple of years. When we ask 18 to 34, so the young folks,
right,
it's up to 72% of the young are saying, I need to get out of here for many reasons, but basically affordability. I want to have a higher quality of life, and I'm not going to get it here. So that's a real challenge. And if people are going to start driving, then we have this concept of that Manhattanization of Toronto, where we have to have those rail spikes and everything, just like, everybody drives or takes the train to Queens or New Jersey. And to me, that's created a really strange dynamic, and Toronto should be better than that. We have a lot more opportunity.
It's I had this exact same conversation with someone the other day that I run with, and we were running along the lakeshore, and there's this whole development being done for Ontario Place.
Yeah.
And, she brought up to me, well, they're going to create this spa and now it's going to be so expensive. And when I was, raising my children, she's in her 60s, I was raising my children, we spent hours at Ontario Place, and it was, it didn't cost so much. And this is what's happening in Toronto. And so, I kind of came back to her and I said, listen, I have hope that they're not going to just create this into, some kind of, mega spa, and that they're really touting it as not that. Let's try to get away from that conspiracy theory. Like, this looks like it's going to be a family run. Let's look at how not family run, but like family focused type of place. It wasn't really maximized for a long time. It's a great piece of land by the water. Anyway, all that to be said, I said, let's hope that the government's going to do something great for it, right? It'll bring money into the city. It could be a tourist attraction. And she said, yeah, but how does someone, what do we do about the teachers, she said. So it's an example like you're saying, right? So a teacher's salary, you need teachers in Toronto. Where are they living, right? Like, are they going to live in Oshawa, and then because they can afford a house in Oshawa, and then they're going to take the GO train in every day? Is that a quality of life for them? And so I said, well, is that what's going to happen in Toronto, right? Like, is it becoming like Manhattan, where everybody lives outside and they commute in? The problem is we don't have the transit system that Manhattan has.
That's part of the problem here.
That was an option.
Well, I think that the reality is that let's pretend we have a blank slate in Toronto.
Okay.
Because we kind of do.
Okay.
So if the policymakers would start paying attention to some of the things we've been telling them, then they should have employment-oriented housing. So someone can actually have an employment-oriented housing development. Let's say, same thing, nurses. They all need to work at the hospital. They all work basically in the same area. Why don't they do that? U of T just announced the project, or I was at the Toronto Board of Trade just a few days ago, and they were talking about how U of T has done a partnership with a developer to create the housing for students. So why wouldn't they do the exact same thing for people who have to work in hospitals or work at schools? And I mean, that's how cities were developed in the past. People had opened a coal mine, then they built a village around it, and sure enough, later it was a city. And I think that we need to consider that old way of thinking and make it new again, because we're not doing it. We expect people to do what you just described. Okay, go live in, and this is true. People live, as you know, as far away as St. Catharines and further, and drive in every day. Belleville.
I used to know a woman who lived in Woodstock and took the Via Rail in.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Well, look at the Highway 401 from Kitchener. Where are they going? They're all coming into the city, or the GTA at least, right? And that you can't even navigate that.
Yeah. Let's not even talk about the 401. It's the last time we built a highway, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're really getting into the nitty gritty for sure. And then the only thing we built was the 407, and I was on it the other day, and it's dead.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, you're just adding more and more costs to everyday living between the gas and everything. It's great. By the way, it just made me realize it's a great. I didn't know that they did that with like coal mines and that type of thing, but it makes total sense. But it's like how firefighters are, right? Like firefighters go to work and they have this place where they live while they're working. It's a little different, but there's a perfect example of something that works really well every single day, but taking that in maybe a more individualized approach. But I couldn't agree more. I think 2024 was I think everybody expected, because interest rates became this thing when COVID was around, that was what dictated the purchase price. I mean, I don't remember what my interest rate was when I bought my very first house when I was 23 years old. I mean, I think they come and go, but then there was this refocus of interest rates, and that's not the only thing that causes people to buy. And I think that we have a very, very good chance of not getting down to those numbers again, because I don't think we want to see an economy that dictates those interest rate cuts, but I think we're going to get close, and I don't think it's going to create that frenzy. I really hope not. And I think that it's going to take some time for people to feel secure. And I think that's what 2024 was, right? I mean, Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I certainly, so I'll take you back to, some of the Ipsos polling that we do. And you're right, like in the second half of 2024 and now as we move through 2025, we've continued to see interest rate cuts, yet we haven't seen a real pickup in market activity. I think you're right. Like people like yourself are seeing more interest on the part of would-be buyers and sellers, but we're certainly not getting back to, the heady days of 2021 when we saw over 120,000 deals. So let's put aside,
by the way,
I mean, to a certain degree too. I mean, we were well above sort of historic norms in terms of sales per capita in that in 2021. So to a certain degree, we were pulling forward deals that otherwise would have been spread out. But let's put that aside, and even the impact, real or perceived, of tariffs, and just talk about borrowing costs. Because when we ask people, are you intending on purchasing a home over the next year, many of them say yes, but at the same time they're saying, but before I do so, I also need to see a substantial reduction in borrowing costs, even from where they are now. So at the end of last year, and we see now a couple more cuts on the part of the Bank of Canada, even at the end of last year, they were saying, look, I need to see 100, 200, even 300 basis points, before I'm going to, get back into the marketplace. And so by the end of the spring, let's say we shave off another 75 basis points on the part of the Bank of Canada. It's only then that you're going to see a lot of households saying, now's the time to pull the trigger, because it's just dollars and cents, as you mentioned, right? Because the majority of people are purchasing a home through the use of a mortgage, a substantial down payment, a lot of them, but still using a mortgage to finance that over the long term. And if you look at the peak of where interest rates were before the Bank of Canada started cutting, we're looking at an average household income in the GTA of over $200,000 is what would be required to buy $1 million home. That's not even the average price home. So to get it down to a more manageable required income, like say 150 to 160,000, we need to get to the end of the spring and see that overnight rate on the part of the Bank of Canada sort of sitting in around 2%. Now at that stage, I think you will start to see more people moving into the market if we've overcome this uncertainty associated with tariffs, and that's a big if.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point. If you look at what the mortgage rates are now. So 5-year fix is what, 4? Something like that, or thereabouts, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so 5-year fix is around 4. And think of the people who actually bought their house in 2020 and 2021 for like 1.9 or 2 just over 2%. So if it's 4, you're doubling your mortgage costs now. Yes, you've had an opportunity to pay a lot down, but if you have to renew, you're going to have to pay a lot more. So I think there are people on the edge, and that may change the equation. I think the government has to pay attention to that possibility that people are going to have to rethink what they're going to do, and can they afford it now? If that's what they're earning and they're at their peak, a lot of them have a pretty significant mortgage, and I've heard some really staggering numbers on the average mortgage these days. But if you follow Jason's thinking, and you need $200,000. Well, so now what? Right? So I think we have to really consider why people are being cautious. And a lot of those homes have 2 mortgages because mom and dad had to bring the down payment in, so they mortgage their house to give their kids a house to buy. So it's going to be an interesting time. We'll see how it works, and that's why I think there's a lot of caution out there.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even touched on the bank of mom and dad for sure, and seeing the largest generational, shift of wealth that we've ever seen, ever. And I very much see it all the time, is that there is now this division of, the ones that have the generational wealth to be given to help their kid, to help them buy a house, or the ones that are moving out of the city. And it is, that missing middle of just, I have a couple that bought in the height, and they both have really good jobs, and they have 2 small children. One of them works for a bank, and they called me and they said, you know what? We don't want to work to pay our mortgage. I think we want to just leave the city. We might even want to leave Canada. I think those conversations are happening more and more, because although, and I was on a great call with the, market whisperer, Benjamin Tal, the great Benjamin Tal, who, said he really did see that the default in mortgages was a micro level, not a macro level, that it was individual, and there are some scary stories for sure. But the reality is that I think a lot of those mortgages that are, you see in the headlines that are coming up for renewal, were also just the banks dialing for dollars, right? They're calling, going, hey, do you want to break your mortgage and get into something? I think there's a lot of that also happening. But I think you're right, John. The ones that bought with really, really a really tight margin, that maybe didn't just have the best team behind them going, maybe this is a little too tight for you, that are going to have to renew and have a double mortgage and they can't afford it. It's heartbreaking, and they're out there.
But I think, and Jason, please help me with this, but if prices come down, and if they're coming down a bit now, but look at what would happen if they actually started building homes that people could buy affordably. So 36% of all new home purchases include development charges, which are just really taxes. Because my understanding is they take this money, put into capital. It's not general, but it's a capital fund, and then they use it to build different things. Well, I'm curious I'd like to audit that. I'd like to see exactly what they're doing with that money and how much they actually have in that reserve or that particular pool, But if you look at that, then and you start slowly bringing supply onto the marketplace, then affordability will help itself. My problem right now is that you have to see the big picture. And if you can't build those houses and people are going to start deciding what they're going to do, rent or buy, well, even rents are coming down a little bit now, but probably not to the point where people can actually afford. So I think there are some really interesting things, and I understand that right now the City of Toronto is considering sort of a deferral, not even a deferral, but waiving development charges in the next little while. They're talking about it today.
For 6 months.
Yeah,
I think it's 6 months. I think she's doing because she's under so much pressure.
Yeah, to do something.
Well, she couldn't even clear the snow off our streets. So don't get me started about her. But I actually had Eric Lombardi on, not to double dip on the the episode, but he founded More Neighbors. It's a really fascinating program. Check out his website. Anyway, same thing. He 35% of all development is taxes. Right? 35% of that unit that you just bought in your condo building is taxes. And then he pointed out a really interesting policy was that anything over 3 floors, I hope I'm getting this right, has to have 2 egresses.
Yeah.
In Europe, this is not true, right? So now because of those 2 egresses, you can't build the right or proper units. You're really pigeonholed into, the kinds of small little cookie cutter, properties that you build. And again, condos are definitely not going to solve our housing crisis for sure. But I agree. I think, the fourplexes that you see in Montreal, I think, allowing, they brought forward the Main Street projects, which was dead on arrival because there's too many, there were too many policies that you had to, something about half of it had to be green space. So you couldn't build anything. There's this great opportunity, but by the way, you can't do it.
Yeah.
And it's great that we have, TRREB out there trying to push them saying, great idea, but it doesn't work. No one's doing it, right? I think I was lucky enough to go on breakfast television and talk about laneway suites because I think they're fantastic. I think these have so multi-generational, they have the ability to open up more housing, rental product. Listen, there was a great article about a couple that retired and lived in their laneway suite and opened up their home to be a rental unit. How many houses can you actually find for families? And yet next to impossible to build.
Well, interesting, because, garden suites have been the thing, and I guess laneway suites qualify, but I think garden suites, 97 or 96 of them were actually, people had submitted permits, 30 have withdrawn, 36 have withdrawn. Do you know how many have been built since 2023? 6. 6 have been completed. 6. So tell me there's not red tape in the way. That's why they just got to get out of the way. And I've said that repeatedly, that they're in their own way. They have policies in opposition. And I've said this so many times. It's policies in opposition. We need to build more affordable homes, but we're going to make it really hard for you to get them in there. And why does it take 2 years if you're doing the exact same project? If you've got the exact same house at the exact same time, the guy wants to do next door, why does he have to wait 2 years when you already know?
Yeah. No, and by the way, to your point, all that money that the levies and the taxes, one could say, well, if you're building a condo, you have to put money into helping infrastructure and the sewers and et cetera, which, by the way, I totally agree. But I had a councilman on from the city of Toronto who was able to confirm that all that money is not spent. It's actually sitting in a bank sitting. They have not. So they're taking all this money. They're taking our land transfer tax. By the way, don't even get, like, I'm sure between the three of us, we can all agree the simplest way to make housing more affordable would be even just take the City of Toronto land transfer tax away.
Yeah.
I think, are we the only city that has two in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly the case. And I mean, when you think about an upfront cost, both at the city and the provincial level that can't be amortized, I mean, that's a massive amount of money that, could either be used to mitigate higher monthly cost or allow you to put a larger down payment or some combination thereof, both which would make, buying your home, more affordable. But, to both of your points, over the last decade, we've seen a massive increase in the number of, TRREB realtors that are reporting transactions outside of the GTA proper. Even before COVID, we had seen that share in, say, 2012 at 10-12%, get up to about a third of all transactions that were sort of taking place outside of the GTA proper. And that just speaks to the fact that, initially we were seeing a run up in home prices because of a lack of inventory, a lot more competition. We were seeing home prices bid up. And then on top of that, obviously over the last 2 or 3 years, the impact of higher borrowing costs. And so people have had to look further afield to purchase a home. Whereas, if we're providing for a greater diversity of home types within given neighborhoods in the City of Toronto or the surrounding suburban areas, people would have more options to stay where they are. So using your clients as an example, they're making good money, but the home they purchased in the neighborhood they wanted might not actually fit their needs as well as it could. Maybe they could benefit from, a Plex or a townhome or what have you, but instead there's this dichotomy between, traditional single family homes and condominium apartments and not much in between. So in a lot of cases, people buy more home than they need, or they wind up staying in a home that's bigger than they need, or something like that. And so, for one of our year in review and outlook reports, we actually hired Urban Strategies, quite a famous planning and architectural firm right here in Toronto. They do work all around the world. And we basically said, give us a sense, both in sort of built up urban areas as well as in greenfield development, what the art of the possible is in terms of, the quote unquote missing middle, in terms of that, gentle density that can be used to sort of bridge the gap between that traditional single family home and, say, a condominium apartment. And the bottom line is a lot of these, developments look really, really cool. And I think if people actually understood what the art of the possible is, there'd be a lot less pushback, from so-called NIMBYs saying, look, I don't want this type of home or that type of home in our neighborhood. And, we have made inroads, right? Like if you drive up some of the sort of the main avenues or thoroughfares within, Toronto, like I'm a North Toronto guy and I drive up Avenue Road and you're starting to see more sort of stacked towns, infill towns on traditional single family lots. And I'll tell you, like I can't imagine, and I live in the neighborhood and I think it makes the neighborhood look better, more diverse. And the other thing is you walk around a lot of neighborhoods in central Toronto and you see that missing middle was a thing back in the 1930s, right? When you saw, single family homes and apartment blocks all commingling on the same streets. And now we're talking about some of the most expensive codes in all of Canada. So it's certainly not hampering property values to any great degree. You could argue it's actually enhancing them. And so I think, more out of the box thinking, more flexibility on the part of policymakers, but also just neighborhood residents would go a long way to seeing, a greater diversity of home types and a greater sort of continuum of affordability in all neighborhoods.
I think we're all on the same page on that. Okay, so 2025 predictions. What do we think? Where are condos going? Lightning round. Where do we think condos are going to end up at the end of this year?
Well, I think, from a first-time buyer perspective, I think as borrowing costs continue to trend lower, I think there's going to be a real opportunity for first-time buyers who, are still paying quite elevated rents, relative to what we saw even 2 and 3 years ago. And so, you're going to be able to take advantage of lower monthly payments, as well as quite a bit of negotiating power in the condo market, because there is a lot of inventory, and there's going to be a lot more inventory coming online as condominiums complete. And so I think, there's a silver lining to that, in the sense that there are a lot of folks out there that say, look, at as borrowing costs trend lower, I want to buy my first home. And it's kind of a positive double whammy, if you will.
For sure. John, where do you think condos are going to end up this year?
Well, I'm going to agree with Jason. There's going to be a lot of condos that are going to come online. But I also think that the challenge will be, will people be buying them and creating the rental opportunities? And if they do that, that would really help. I just feel that, not a lot of people want to buy 350 square foot studios. It just doesn't make sense that they didn't build the right stock in many cases. And then you've got the two extremes. You've got luxury, and then you've got these things. And frankly, maybe at the right price, but would you pay the going rate on this? I don't think so. So we're not going to see developers back. And it takes 10 years to get a project off the ground. So even if they start today, they're 10 years away to get it, keys in hand. So I think we're going to see a glut of product. We're going to see people who, because they're in the middle of building, they're going to have to build them. And maybe that will put some downward pressure on price and give people the opportunity to actually buy. I hope so too.
How many cycles do you guys think it'll take before we go through all of this? I mean, it's so hard to predict, because I really think the bottom group is the hardest. Like you were saying, that 350, 400, 500, less than 500 is really what's kind of choking the whole middle up. There's actually not a ton of luxury. There's not a ton of great 2-bedroom, 800 square foot, well priced. I have to tell you, like I'm out there looking. It's really, the numbers are all in those small, no locker, no parking.
I don't know if if the cycle is the way to look at it. I think I would look at it. So there's a great metric that Jason presents on a regular basis, that are 2 bedrooms. Apartments are the number one rentals, because people are looking for either someone to share the costs with, or they're starting a family. But if you're going to start a family and you want to buy, can you do it here? No. So you might have to, until you're able to buy that 2-bedroom condo and afford it, if you've got, unless you're making really, really good money. But so I just believe that if people are telling us they're going to leave the city, the 18 to 34, these are the guys who are going to start families, that are probably going to want to, have a piece of their own property, whether it's a condo or a house. And they're telling us they're leaving. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take, but I think it's going to have to be a very, very aggressive policy change on development charges. They have to ease things on taxes, ease things on development and building, without sacrificing safety and, integrity, right? They have to maintain all those things. So just do the right things.
Okay, fantastic. And last one, we are now seeing, ChatGPT, I know it was even discussed in the training on Habistat, utilizing AI. You're seeing I think I saw a new AI brokerage being promoted on Instagram. I mean, that kind of stuff always makes me chuckle. But, I came from the newspaper world where I watched, the giants like the Toronto Star kind of sit back on their laurels and say, we're the Toronto Star. We're not worried about digital. We're not worried. We're always going to be here, and they slowly watched, and then really quickly watched the tide turn to the point where, I think they sold their building a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So, I'm always kind of got my spidey senses up and wondering, whether that is something that could happen too. One could say a transactional experience in like real estate. And I think there are people who are looking for that. I think there are a lot of people who are not. But, where do you see the business in 5 years? Knowing that AI is now taking a bigger portion of it, where do you see let's start here. Where do you see the brokerage model going?
Well, that's hard to predict, but let me give you my impression of AI.
Sure.
So a few years ago, before it became known, someone sent me a link to ChatGPT, and I looked at it and I thought, okay, this is interesting. And then I was asked a couple years ago at a conference in the States what I thought about it, and I said, it's a toy. And it is a toy, right? And it's maturing now where they're not giving you information that is potentially copyright or lies because it makes it up. It's called, they call it hallucinating, if you will. But, and there were lawyers that were sued for using fake cases and all that stuff because they used GPT. But the next iteration of AI, and we're launching a tool pretty soon. It's called Artie that helps members, use voice or SMS or I think you can use WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, and you can query Artie about rules and member benefits or key industry topics, and you can get that information so it's consistent and it's accurate, and you get it as quickly as possible. You don't have to make the call; you can just go get it. But if we're looking at what they've really been doing with AI over the last 10 years or longer, to me that's really significant and a little bit frightening. And we've seen some people pull back on their AI initiatives because, they've gone a little too far, and it took a couple people to stop some projects that were actually going frightening. Yeah, very frightening and disturbing way. But I think it will be a very important tool as it matures and people adapt it properly without this, kind of Dr. Evil approach, right? So I think if we take a very sober approach to AI, it'll be an important tool that we can all make use of. There's one thing that AI can't really do. It can't go in and visit a house. It can't tell people what it was like in that home that was sold 6 months ago because, Rachel, you saw it, and they don't know what it was like or what it smelled like, or what needed to.
So true.
Right? You can do certain things, but that knowledge that a realtor has, you cannot take that away, especially people who know their neighborhoods. Like
the good ones, yeah.
Yeah,
no, for sure.
Right?
I take my sellers out to see everything that's, like, as we're prepping their listing, I take them out to see the stuff that gets listed because, they see something on pictures and I'm like, but you didn't feel it.
That's right.
You didn't walk in. I said,
That's right.
You can tell the minute you walk into a house, this is one of the good ones, or you can walk right out.
Or, I used to sell, and I would take people to homes that they would give me their specifics, and then I show them, and they go, well, this isn't it. And then they go and they just walk up to, I think this is the house. They're not even inside. There's a certain thing that happens that AI is not going to be able to replicate. And not only that, there's another fascinating thing about the real estate industry and working with clients. As you know, doing it yourself, there's a bit of psychology that has to be involved. Okay. Yeah, and what I mean by that is that your people have questions and they rely on their realtors. I don't think AI is going to have that personal touch. And it's going to give you the data. It's going to synthesize the data. It's going to be able to give you certain things. Yes, and we're actually have another product called RESPI, which is the photo, right? And with RESPI, RESPI actually will allow you to search a photo. Okay. So if you drop the photo into the search box and you have all your other parameters, let's say it's a white kitchen, it'll show you all the white kitchens. Or if you want to see pools, it'll show you all the white pools. And we also use this to deconstruct the photos. It'll deconstruct the photos and give us, it's able to tell, is this laminate, is this hardwood, those kind of things, yes. But that's pretty data-oriented. But
for sure.
The human aspect, until they really, really get that right, I can't see AI taking it.
Listen, I always say, I'm not a realtor. I'm a marriage counselor. I'm a psychologist. I'm a babysitter. I think that you're bang on. There's a lot of this business that's very relationship based. I learned early on, that's who I am. I'm not a transactional person. I think there are people transactional. I think there is a generation coming up that potentially is going to look at a condo and say, I'm happy to do this on, what's that new platform coming out, Height or something that they're creating? It's like a marketplace where agents can bid on the business. It's a race to the bottom. But you know what?
Did you say
Sorry.
Hive? Hive?
Yeah,
Hive.
yeah. But I also say, listen, if that's what someone wants, all the power to them. But I don't think that the role, as you're saying, of a realtor will be gone. I think it's your biggest investment. It's just like you see the advisors online, the Quest Trades, financial advisors that I know are not feeling it.
Well, AI fits perfectly into the technology space, and we're going to be definitely, all of us will be using it to deliver this information. But the EQ factor, and these people have to have a high AQ now, which is the adaptability quotient. But I think you look at what it means down the road and where we're actually headed. I think there's the personal touch is so important.
Agreed.
But think about where these companies can use AI, and can you replicate the human experience? The trusted professional that you've had a relationship with for several years. This is the third house you've bought from them, or maybe investment properties. They need that person.
Yep, I agree. Jason, any last thoughts in where you see the industry in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say AI is a tool that, whether you're a realtor or in some other space, that you can use to become more productive. So, imagine work that you're spending 5 hours on, you can get it down to an hour or a half hour, and still be providing the same or even better value to your client. That's more clients that you'd be able to speak to, more homes you'd be able to, visit in person on behalf of your clients or with your clients. And I think, thinking back to the, 90s, I remember going to university and people and professors saying, hey, you can't use the internet because, for whatever reason, we don't think it's as good as the dusty old journal that you got to go over and photocopy in the library. Well, go back to a student now at university, it wouldn't even make any sense. And so, the quality of work, just goes up, right? And so I think you got to look at it that way too. It's not a binary decision. Either I'm going to use AI or I'm not. It's rather, how am I going to use AI to continue to provide the value that I provided yesterday to my client in the future, and maybe be able to do it even more so, or do it for more clients because I have more time on my hands, because I've found new tools to produce some of my material quicker.
I could not agree more. And I'm really excited to keep an eye out for the new tools that you've talked about. And I need to get myself integrated in Habistat. I'm very excited about it. As I said, I'm all about data for myself and for my clients and my team. So guys, I know you are incredibly busy gentlemen. I really appreciate you giving me an hour of your time today. And for all my listeners, thank you, John. Thank you, Jason. This was amazing. And thank you so much for everything that you do for the realtors in Toronto and the GTA, and for fighting the good fight.
Thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Really enjoyed it.
Seeing you both. Take care.